Right now on the National Weather Desk, here comes winter. Bitter cold and heavy snow are descending from Canada. We'll show you when and where you can expect to see the changes. Backcountry dangers, 2 avalanche deaths in less than a week, has officials warning Utah skiers and snowboarders.
Taking those risks backcountry just isn't worth it.
Tornado survivor. Hear how a fisherman survived a tornado while out on the water.
I shouldn't be here telling you this story. I made a terrible decision.
The new rules Washington state voters must follow to protect killer whales.
It's about changing the mindset to give these whales as much space as possible.
And water worries. Why concerns about the snowpack in the Rockies are being felt in Las Vegas.
We get 90% of our drinking water from that snowpack.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Well, good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Janae Bowens. The eastern half of the country is starting the new year with bitter cold and in many places with snow and ice. Arctic air from Canada is heading south. It arrives in the upper Midwest today. By Saturday, much of the nation from Maine to Florida and all the way to Texas will be below average. It gets even colder by early next week when lows in places like Tennessee and Alabama could drop to the 20s, and the cold could stick around for much of the month. And then there's the snow. This is a look at Syracuse this morning where the snow is already falling. The city is under a lake effect snow warning through Sunday morning. 1 to 3 feet of snow could fall, but snow will also fall from the central plains to the mid-Atlantic. The heaviest could be from St. Louis to Cincinnati, with icing possible from Kansas to Virginia. And by Monday, snow could be falling here in Washington, D.C., as well as Philadelphia. Now, it's been a deadly week in Utah. In just 4 days, 2 people were caught in an avalanche and killed. One of the victims was a 54-year-old snowboarder found buried under 20 feet of snow. Officials believe he unintentionally triggered the avalanche while boarding in the backcountry. Just days earlier, a 38-year-old man from Canada was found buried in 3 feet of snow. As Kristen McPeak reports, these stories are a stark reminder of how important it is to understand avalanche conditions before heading into the mountains.
At the Big Cottonwood Canyon bus stop, Aiden and his friends wait for their ride. They typically stick to the resorts when it comes to snowboarding.
And just knowing the season, I mean, we don't have a ton of snow right now, so taking those risks backcountry just isn't worth it.
Also at the bus stop is Dad Brady Campbell. He heard about the recent avalanche deaths in Big Cottonwood Canyon and Mill Creek Canyon.
That's too bad. That shouldn't happen. For all the information and capabilities that we have, that shouldn't happen.
Drew Hardesty, a forecaster with the Utah Avalanche Center, says to know before you go when recreating in the mountains.
When people see this, if they're wanting to go hiking with their families or that kind of thing, should they take note, or is this only a certain population of people that are more affected by these avalanches?
I think what's really key to take home here is that in these cases, it's not beginners that are finding trouble in the backcountry and in the mountains. It's people with a little bit of skill and experience, some education.
The Utah Avalanche Center released life-saving tips for the backcountry. Don't travel alone. Practice first aid and companion rescue. Bring a spare beacon and do a beacon check. Understand the avalanche forecast and terrain. And these are things that both Aiden and Brady are aware of and share.
I might teach my kids not to duck the rope.
Now, a man in Texas is grateful to see 2025 and is sharing his story after riding out a tornado on his boat. Brian Johnson says he was fishing with his friend and his dog on Saturday about 60 miles east of Houston. The footage initially shows the storm in the distance before it quickly approaches the boat. Johnson says when the tornado hit, they tried to hold on, but the boat eventually flipped over.
I shouldn't be here telling you this story. I made a terrible decision. All the warnings were there, and I didn't heed them, and yet somehow God spared me. So I got to believe he spared me for a purpose.
And now Johnson, his friend, and his dog all made it out safely. The National Weather Service confirmed an EF3 tornado in Chambers County, where Winnie is located. Forecasters estimate it brought maximum winds of 138 miles per hour. Now, that tornado was part of an outbreak that stretched from Texas to Georgia. Birmingham meteorologist Evan Chikvara takes a closer look at the twisters that struck Alabama and why it's so important to make sure you are aware of the threat of severe weather.
It was an active final weekend of 2024 with numerous tornado reports across the southeast. This is a look at preliminary data from the Storm Prediction Center. Now, as we zoom in and look at central Alabama, understand surveys are still ongoing as we speak, but what we do know is we've had several here across central Alabama. In fact, as many as 16 tornadoes statewide, 13 of which in the BMX, that's the National Weather Service at Birmingham market. Some of the notable ones here: EF0 at Harpersville, 1.5 miles in track length, about 85-mile-an-hour winds. The Logan Martin tornado, also an EF0, it had a track of 2.25 miles. And then the Roberts Mill Pond, EF1, 1.5-mile track. And again, surveys still ongoing. We also had some wind damage that impacted a lot of folks. And if we talk about our tornado season, frequency by month, you look here and you get to November and December. We can still very much have tornadoes these months. So let's talk about what you can do here in the future as we move ahead into the springtime. The numbers are only going to go up. As you can see here, we get into the spring and the numbers really peak in March as well as April. Have multiple ways to receive notifications. I had several people reach out to me and said, hey, I had multiple ways to get the alerts. I wasn't paying attention to the radio, but that helped. Having that weather radio. So have multiple ways to receive alerts. Be prepared. No severe weather in our forecast now, but it's better to be prepared in these quiet scenarios so we're ready when the weather gets bad.
The new year brings a new rule for boaters in Washington state waters. It's meant to protect the life of southern resident killer whales. Boaters now have to stay 1,000 yards away from the species. Denise Whitaker explains how this new rule will reduce the threats to the species.
I mean, whales are one of the great features of boating around here.
Being close to a whale is a life-changing experience. Never gets old.
Boating his entire life, John Gardner's seen southern resident whales, transient bigs, grays, and humpbacks. Washington's new law will keep Gardner and all others out on the water 1,000 yards away from southern resident killer whales.
I think it's too far. 1,000 yards, you will not even be able to see the whales, and you're too close.
So it's not about having the perfect measurement here. It's about changing the mindset to give these whales as much space as possible.
Julie Watson, the state's leader for its killer whale policy, tells me this new law creates a uniform policy for everyone on the water, commercial, recreational, even kayakers and paddleboarders.
You're going to do your best to try to look to see if you can see any of the breaches ahead of time, any of the spray coming off of them, to try to keep your distance, but they can come up for sure.
The whales, I'm told, are very much affected by noise. And so keeping a long way away from them makes sense to me.
That's the science, Watson tells me, is partially behind this new law.
Southern resident orcas really struggle to find, catch, and eat their favorite food, Chinook salmon, when boats are nearby.
This new 1,000-yard regulation only applies to the southern resident whales. So how can boaters tell the difference?
But if you don't know and you see an orca fin out in the distance and you're not sure if it's a southern resident.
I mean, I think we'd like to keep them around if we can.
Now, just in time for the new year, a rehabilitated harbor seal was returned to the ocean Tuesday morning. Linguini the seal was suffering from pneumonia, had puncture wounds, and was lethargic when he was rescued in October. He was 7 months old back then. Mystic Aquarium released Linguini at Blue Shutters Beach in Charleston, Rhode Island. It was the aquarium's 16th release of the year. Now, many of your friends and neighbors spent New Year's Day taking a hike. It was all part of the America's State Parks tradition of first days hikes. Folks from coast to coast, including here in South Carolina, took to trails on their own or with a guide. People who participated said spending time outdoors in nature is a great way to start the new year. But if hiking isn't your thing, maybe ice boating is. Now, this is Riley Lake, southwest of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Until recently, these lakes weren't frozen thanks to warm weather and even fog. But a cold front created just enough ice to allow these ice boaters to set sail. And for more great weather content, be sure to check us out on social media. We post all the latest weather headlines and video. Just search the National Weather Desk on your favorite social media platform. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, temperatures are dropping, and that can be a risk for your home. We'll have tips on making sure your pipes don't freeze this winter season. And we'll show you exactly how snowflakes form.
Presented by the National Weather Desk.
Behold a recent sunrise view, complete with alternating bands of ray and shadow known as crepuscular rays. These beams are most visible at sunrise and sunset, and when they appear opposite the sun, the beams are called anti-crepuscular rays. And in South Carolina, another one of nature's many sky paintings, a halo up high with a circumhorizontal arc underneath.
For more content like this, follow the National Weather Desk on Instagram.
2024 will most surely be one of the warmest years on record, both around the world and here in the United States. Columbus, Ohio meteorologist Sarah Converse has more.
2024 is on track to be the warmest year on record, both globally and in the state of Ohio.
Almost every single county, if you look at the county level, it's also their record warmest as well. And that goes for daytime high averages, overnight low averages, or just the annual average temperature.
State climatologist Aaron Wilson says this could be becoming a new normal.
8 out of the top 10 warmest years since 1895 have all happened since 1990.
The record warmth fueling a lack of snow, but also exacerbating the drought we've been seeing since early summer.
I think recovering from drought is an important thing to think about this upcoming year. And just, to embrace and be ready for that variability that Ohio experiences. We have throughout our history. It's just, the data is showing those extremes are getting a little bit more extreme, both on the temperature side, but also in particular on the rainfall side, where we swing back and forth between very dry and very wet conditions.
As we head into 2025, below average temperatures are likely. However, it is too soon to say if that pattern will continue through the rest of the winter.
Now, Las Vegas has not had any measurable rain since July 13th, but more importantly, the region needs snow on the western slopes of the Rocky Mountains. The region gets 90% of its drinking water from that snowpack. As Steve Wolford reports, the snowpack did not get much help from Mother Nature in December.
Statewide, Colorado's Natural Resources Conservation Service says snowpack levels reached 134% of the 30-year median at the end of November. That's a 10-year high. But right now, only one of the state's 8 regions is above median through December. The other 7 are slightly below or well below where they should be. So what does this mean later in the year when that snow melts and starts heading downstream toward Lake Mead?
We did get a few storms over this last weekend, but we're still below average. And it very much is dependent on what basin or sub-basin you are in within the Colorado River system. But more so what that is telling us is that we need to be planning. It's too early to tell.
Mitchell says they can see snow as late as June, so this is really a waiting game, and it's also worth noting that the Colorado snowpack peaks in April.
Now, winter means snow, and it can be inches or feet, but how exactly is snow measured? Let's take a look at recent Instagram posts from meteorologist Joy Bettenhausen to find out.
Now, you may find this a little goofy, but have you really thought about how we measure snowfall? Let's make sure you're prepared for this winter season. Now, you may think you just stick the ruler down to the ground and measure it off and you're good to go. Well, actually, you want to find the flattest ground surface in your yard. Stick the ruler all the way down. Make sure to read off to about 1/10 of an inch. Stay away from snow drifts. Stay away from being really close to your house because that's not going to give you an accurate measurement. If you have drifts all over your yard, find the least driftiest spots and take about 4 measurements and average those. Now, what would help is if you had a snowboard. No, not the snowboard we use on the ski slopes, but this type of snowboard. Essentially, it's a flat board. It's white or light, and that gives you that flat surface that you need. You want to take measurements frequently throughout the snow event and make sure to report to your National Weather Service office or to your local broadcast meteorologist. And here's me taking snowfall measurements at my first station in Joplin.
Now, as temperatures drop this winter, frozen pipes are a top concern for people who live in colder parts of the country. Kaylin McGee has tips on how you can protect your home's water line.
You may not think about it while you're sitting by the heater, but frostbite isn't the only thing you have to worry about during the dog days of winter. It can cost you thousands of dollars if your water pipes freeze up. It can happen to anyone. Even Kirksville Public Works Director Adam Dorrell has had it happen to him.
I had a line frozen in my basement this year because I had a basement window that was cracked open that I had forgot about. So I actually had to deal with that myself. It can happen to anybody.
The best way to protect your pipes from freezing is making sure they're insulated and keep your faucets dripping slowly to keep the water moving.
Knowing what you've got, making sure everything is sealed up like it needs to be. Knowing if you've had problems in the past when it gets really cold, if you need to leave your water dripping or something like that, that's always a good solution. Another more permanent solution, there's heat tapes and things like that that you can put on your line, insulation, that can always help out that situation too.
Outside your home, make sure your hoses are emptied and the faucets are shut off so you don't have any standing water.
All of your outside spigots that you may have a hose connected to, make sure all of those are turned off, that hoses are drained, things. You don't want water in those lines either. Anything out in your yard or outside that's exposed to temperature, you'd want to make sure is turned off.
If you think you have a leak, you should shut off your water valve immediately and call a plumber if you need help thawing your pipes.
Flooding can cause major issues. One of the most dangerous can be road conditions. Rigo Aguilera spoke to officials in Oregon about how to stay safe on flooded roads.
The heavy rain brings high water flows that can jeopardize road conditions, according to the Oregon Department of Transportation. This could lead to potential hydroplaning by vehicles traveling at high speeds. Hydroplaning occurs when vehicles drive over high water spots, causing a vehicle's tires to lose traction with the ground, causing the vehicle to glide. There are also greater potentials for landslides and rockfall on highways throughout the area.
In addition to high water and flooding, you want to be looking for debris on the road, fallen trees, rocks, mudslides, and that kind of thing. We just always remind people to slow down, especially in areas of high water. You have better control of your vehicle from hydroplaning if you are not driving too fast.
Following a recent water rescue, Central Douglas Fire and Rescue urges residents to be aware and avoid outdoor activities that may be dangerous.
So we got called for a person in distress in the river who was trying to get to safety, got swept into the heavy current, ended up calling for us to come assist him to get safe to the bank of the river.
The rescue team was able to rescue the person who was out on the river in a homemade raft despite the hazardous waters containing broken tree debris.
Whenever the water levels come up like that, not only does the water become more swift, there's a lot of debris, trees, a lot of hazards in the river, and it's important for people to understand that weather reports to warnings that come out, and have some backup plans to be able to get to safety if things occur faster than they can recover from, naturally or in a normal circumstance.
It's also recommended to check weather conditions ahead of any outdoor activities.
Time now for a short break, but first we take flight over Hatley Point Ski Resort in North Carolina.
The National Weather Desk.
It's snow season, so we thought we would share a recent Instagram post from Salt Lake City meteorologist Lindsay Storrs on the different types of snowflakes.
You've probably heard the saying, no two snowflakes are alike. And while that is true, we can actually classify snowflakes based on their shape. If the temperature is between 25 and 32 degrees, you get snowflakes that look like thin plates. Between 21 and 25 degrees, snowflakes that look like small needles form. 14 to 21 degrees, the snowflakes will be hollow columns, and stellar plates form when the temperature is 10 to 14 degrees. Dendrites form between 3 and 10 degrees. 8 degrees below zero to 3 degrees above zero is when the stellar plates form again, and if the temperature is more than 8 degrees below zero, the hollow columns make a return. Humidity can also determine the shape that forms. If you've got a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, we tend to get more intricate shapes. When you have less moisture in the atmosphere, the shapes tend to be pretty simple.
Now, for more weather content, be sure to check us out on social media. Just search the National Weather Desk. We'll be right back.